Hello friends, I am Oleksandr Palii, Ukrainian historian. Today I will tell you about the Holodomor, artificial famine in Ukraine. In his book Second World War, Winston Churchill, British Prime Minister, said that Stalin estimated the number of victims of the Holodomor at 10 million people. This genocide was the biggest in the history of mankind and was committed by Russia. In the early 20th century, Ukraine was compared to China in terms of the demographic growth rate. After several Holodomors, Ukraine was near the top in terms of its depopulation rate. In Western Ukraine, which was badly hit by wars, deportations and repressions, but was not hurt by the Holodomor, the demographic situation is much better than in the rest of Ukraine. As for my family, my great-grandfather's brother was taken hostage by Soviet Punitin authorities who wanted to take away his family's grain. He was 16 years old then, and no one has seen him since. The family had nothing. My great-grandfathers and 6 of his brothers died from the Holodomor. My great-grandmother was able to get on train and leave Ukraine for Moldova in Russia only after asking for in Russian language. One of her young children died in the train. In Russia at that time there were no difficulties with food, so genocide it was or not genocide. The truth is that in 1932 the Soviet Union began to organize the Holodomor in Ukraine under the pretext of destroying private farms and forming collective farms. The famine covered the entire territory of what was then the Ukrainian SSR without affecting the neighboring regions of Russia and Belarus. Special teams forced their way into households and took away or destroyed all the food. This was done on a special order which targeted only Ukraine and did not extend to other areas of the Soviet Union. During Holodomor, entire regions of Ukraine, settlements, Ukraine's border and the mostly Ukrainian populated Kuban region in southern Russia were surrounded by troops that prevented people from leaving these territories, thus dooming them to death from starvation. None of this was observed in other regions of the USSR. The corpses of people who were starved to death lay in the streets of towns, cities and villages of Ukraine and were picked up and buried by special services on a daily basis. In an effort to save at least the children, many peasants took them to cities and just left them in the streets. The majority of those who died of starvation were Ukrainians, residents of areas with predominantly Ukrainian population in Ukraine and the Kuban. However, there were some non-Ukrainian victims, unless they worked in government bodies which were supplied with foodstuffs. The government viewed representatives of other nations who died of starvation as chips that could fly when Ukrainian trees are hewed. In 1933, at the peak of Holodomor, a resolution was adopted which allowed withdrawal from a collective farm only with the permission of the authorities. As a result, people in rural areas died of starvation, unable to escape from the areas where Holodomor was organized. The Holodomor was carried out in parallel with the mass extermination of the Ukrainian intelligentsia and the banning of Ukrainian schools and newspapers in Kuban. While famine spread to more areas and millions of people starved to death, the USSR intensively exported grain in large amounts. The government provided no aid in connection with the famine in Ukraine, even though it was much worse than the famine in the Volga region in 1921 and 22. If someone in the USSR uttered the word famine with reference to Ukraine and it came to the attention of the authorities, this person would certainly have been thrown into prison, despite the fact that the entire adult population of Ukraine remembered the Holodomor. It should be noted that Ukraine has always produced far more food than it consumed since ancient times. Soviet society was under the total control of the party. The party knew the details of the private lives of individuals. It would have been impossible for millions in Ukraine to starve to death in the course of nearly 2 years without Moscow's approval. During the Holodomor, the USSR could not kill all Ukrainians because Moscow did not have control over a fourth of the Ukrainian population, which resided in western Ukraine outside of Soviet borders. Moreover, the world was heading for a new war in the early 1930s. Ukraine would lose its economic significance if it had no population. Therefore, the Kremlin wanted to break the back of Ukraine and turn Ukrainians into genetic material that would blindly serve the empire rather than to wipe out the entire Ukrainian people. According to 1937 official census in the Ukraine, the number of Ukrainians was 10,800,000, lower than expected based on the previous census and the average rate of demographic growth across the USSR and in Ukraine. Persons responsible for organizing this census were executed. The 1939 census data showed that the gap was 8 million, more than 8 million people. According to modern researchers, 2-4 times more people died in an average Ukrainian village in the Holodomor than in the Second World War, which took the lives of some 7 million Ukrainians. The government moved people from other regions of the USSR, primarily from Russia, to settle them in place of deceased in Ukraine. In 1934 alone, almost 300,000 families from Russia and Belarus were moved to Ukrainian villages decimated by the Holodomor. Red Army soldiers moved into the houses of Kuban Ukrainians in stanitsas or villages. Then the local population had been deported to Siberia. The new arrivals were supplied with food while the indigenous Ukrainian population was dying of starvation en masse. As a result of Holodomor, arrests and forced deportation, the number of Ukrainians in the Kuban fell from 62 in 1926 to 4%, from 62% to 4%. For a long time, the USSR fed its agents in the West, in the media and universities in the West. So it was profitable to to lie about Holodomor, especially then Ukrainians could not say a word. During the operation, during the war in Ukraine, during the operation of our grain from Ukraine program, now during war we have already managed to save 20 million people from hunger, and achievement made possible by just one of the humanitarian programs. Overall, Ukraine's food export now feed 400 million people in 100 countries of the world. Our grain export is one of the biggest, of maybe second or third in world now. So Ukraine is one of the world's largest contributors to food security, and we maintain this important role even amidst a full-scale war. This is why it is crucial that we continue standing together to defend food security even now. And now Hitler is back. His name is Putin. Russia wants genocide now as it wanted in 100 years ago. That explains the mobile crematories that were seen in the first stages of the war. Russia was preparing for new genocide of Ukrainians long before a large-scale invasion. This preparation included drawing killings lists, mobile crematoria, and the creation of mass graves. Before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the Russian occupiers were informed about the creation of mass graves. The dismissal lists include teachers of Ukrainian language, literature and history, veterans of war, journalists, scientists, writers, priests of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine and other denominations that supported Ukraine. Public and political figures, heads of state and self-government bodies. I want to say that same things happens before in every country Russia managed to occupy. Not Holodomor in all countries, Holodomor only in Ukraine and in Moldova. Moldova had its own Holodomor in 1946, 1947. So the most terrible secret of Russia is its true history. Russia is the only country whose archives have been classified for more than 100 years, because these archives do not contain the history of the country. These archives contain lists of endless Russian crimes, as Holodomor. So truth is needed for our people, and which now defend the whole world from Russian barbarians. So good luck. We stand with Ukraine, people. Good luck to you. Goodbye.